The historical record is clear that parts of black political thought at the time were influenced by socialist, communist, and Marxist labor and anti-colonial and revolutionary movements during the 1920 or the 20th century. And those ideas entered through Black American thinkers, but many were also sharpened by Caribbean and foreign-born radicals who looked at America from an anti-American lens. They looked at it from a global revolutionary lens. People like Cyril Briggs and Claude McKay and Hubert Harrison and Otis Husward and Claudia Jones and Kwame Ture. These are all examples of foreign-born or Caribbean-connected figures who helped shape this radical Marxist, socialist, Black political language. And those Black radicals leaders, they didn't invent Black American suffering out of thin air. They didn't invent slavery. We were dealing with something. We were dealing with Jim Crow. We were dealing with police brutality. We were dealing with redlining. We were dealing with segregation. And they responded to real conditions. But in their attempt to define and address the problems Black America was faced with at the time and give some solutions, I guess they were trying to help. What they did was they moved parts of Black politics away from an American-centered fight, okay, to capitalize on our citizenship and ownership and land and family structure and schools and better businesses and legal reform and building better institutions toward this global fight against capitalism, against America, against quote unquote colonialism, and against Western power in general. And that shift matters because foundational Black Americans can't afford to become politically untethered from the only country in the world where we have a constitutional claim and a historical claim and a blood claim. And let's be clear about the numbers. Look, just so you all know, Gallup reported in 2025, just last year, that only 54% of Americans had a positive view of capitalism and 39% had a positive view of socialism. You see that? Look, Pew found that Black adults view of capitalism, this is you grown-ups. Black adults' views on capitalism have become more negative, from 54% of Black adults expressing a negative view on capitalism in 2022, up from 40% in 2019. It's like the richer y'all get, the more you hate capitalism. That is crazy. That tells you something. That anti-capitalist thinking has gained ground, especially among Black people and younger Americans. But foundational Black Americans need to ask a very hard question. If capitalism is so terrible, why has capitalism been so good to you? We are not the people that we were in the 1920s. This is not 1960. This isn't a time when the majority of us are living in abject poverty with no access to education, no access to business, no access to home ownership, no access to professional life, and no meaningful way to build wealth. We're richer, we're more educated, we're professionals, more capitalized now. We have more options now. And whether Black people want to admit it or not, capitalism in America has helped produce the richest population of people of African descent on the planet. Do you hear me? As you sitting there in your air conditioner with your cell phone in the middle of the day, your Black behind would be in the fields 200 years ago, picking cotton and chopping sugar cane. And some of you pretty girls will be trying to run away from master, his son trying to poke you with a new baby. But again, we are different now. Look, that doesn't mean that the racial wealth gap has disappeared. I get that. I'm not saying that, okay? But we still have to be honest with ourselves. Can we be honest? Do y'all come over here for the truth, right? I'm going to give it to you. The Census Bureau reported that Black households made up to 13.6% of the U.S. households in 2021, but held only 4% of household wealth. And the Black median household wealth was still far below white median household wealth. Shout out to Urban Hunt. But a lot of that has to do with you just checking one person as opposed to two. White people get married. So they got two incomes coming in. That's why it's like that. I'm just saying. But again, let's be honest with the timeline also. Generation X, just listen. Generation X, which started in 1965, is the first Black American generation born fully free. Somebody type fully free. You understand? In other words, we had all the rights of citizenship, and we can exercise that. So when we talk about wealth gap, we're not comparing equal histories. Everybody else had like a 200-year head start. And in many ways, foundational Black American has had the, we've only had 1 or 2 generations to compete under anything resembling open legal access, and while others had years to build land and business and capital inheritance and institutional power. Remember, we were run up out of our land in the South. We fled the South. First generation, first migration, second migration. We had to get out of there. It was so bad. And they took our land. So we literally had to restart. But see, here's the thing, and let's be honest, that same census report says that 1 in 20 Black households had a wealth of over $1 million. That's not a small thing. Pew Research reported that in 2023, 25% of Black households earn more than $100,000, $100,000 or more. That's one in 4, including 24% of single race households. The Institute for Family Studies reported that 57% of Black men had reached the middle class or higher as adults, up from 38% in 1960. Do you hear me? That means that damn near 2/3 of Black men, by the time they reach middle age, they're either upper middle class, or rich. Do you understand how amazing that is? What other group of men can say that? Especially going through what we went through. Think about that. They accredited education, which our ancestors fought for, work, which we fought for, marriage, which we always had, military service, which we fought for, church attendance, which we always had, and personal agency. In other words, taking responsibility for yourself and your own act. They accredited that to the success. That's not failure, family. That is progress. That's capitalism. That's education, marriage, work, military service, church, business ownership, home ownership, personal agency, changing the economic profile of Black America. We aren't where we were. This isn't the 1920s. This isn't the 1960s. The majority of us aren't living in abject poverty, trapped under open legal segregation. We have homes, we have businesses, we have 6-figure households. And that means that old story that Black America is only poor and desperate and powerless and trapped is no longer true. And look, I said earlier, when I said we're the richest group of Africans, do you remember that part? We're the richest group of people of African descent on the planet. We have more millionaires in the United States, more Black millionaires in the United States than the whole 54 countries of Africa. Did y'all know that? I'm talking about scale, the scale of our economic position compared to the rest of the African world. Black Americans live inside the largest capitalist economy in human history. There was a report by McKinsey. It estimated that Black consumers' collective economic power would grow from 910 billion in consumption in 2019 to 1.7 trillion by 2030. Damn. By 2030, we damn near $22 trillion in spending power. Nelson related reporting has played. That's how much money we put in the economy. That's a lot of money. Meanwhile, the World Bank has a list of sub-Saharan African. The GDP, gross national per capita is $1,673. That's what there is. So we aren't living like Africans in the poorest regions of the world. We aren't even living like people in the Caribbean. We're Americans. We're foundational Black Americans, and we earned it. We're the descendants of people who built wealth out of forced labor and then rebuilt after slavery. Then we got bombed out and burned out. And then we rebuilt again after Jim Crow and rebuilt after redlining and rebuilt after discrimination and still managed to become one of the most economically powerful Black populations in the world. So when anti-American pro-Black sit around condemning capitalism, okay, I get the frustration. I understand the historical injustice. I get that. But I don't accept the blindness.